Thanks, Belinda. Morning, everybody. It's a great honour for me to be here to support a fantastic charity who's set up a long time ago by a friend of mine who also did the Kokoda track with me initially. When I started the Kokoda track over 24 years ago, I would walk into a room like this and I'd ask people, hands up here, who has heard of the Kokoda track? So we might do that. How many people here have heard of the Kokoda track in Papua New Guinea? And that's a fantastic sign, because when I started 24 years ago, I would walk into a room and I would be lucky if I got 2 or 3 hands. And then I'd ask, hands up those who've heard of the Battle of the Alamo with Davy Crockett, a very famous American battle. And you'd probably have half the room would put their hands up. And to me, it taught me a lot. It taught me, first of all, well, the importance of history. We've always had this thing. Where I come from in Ireland, we always had this thing about history. If you don't know where you came from, well, how do you know where you're going? That's always my big thing. Now, over the years, we talk about Aidan's been across the Kokoda track 121 times. What does that actually mean? Well, 121 times, you put it in perspective, 96 Ks as the crow flies. But if you actually put a set of hiking boots on that fella and ask him to walk the Kokoda track, it's actually 130 kilometers. So if you do the maths on that, 120 times 130 is loads. He's right. 16,000 kilometers. It works out 16,000 kilometers. So there's a lot of boots to be worn out in that time, and probably a few joints as well. But 16,000 kilometers and over a period of 24 years. So you work that out again. It works out about 3.5 to 4 years walking full time. Who would have thought that an Irishman would have walked the Kokoda track 121 times? Who would have thought? And I remember the first time that I was asked to take the Kokoda track. And I was doing a lot of work at the time at Microsoft. And there's a fella, he was the CEO, his name was Daniel Petrie, a very good man. He turned around to me and he said, Aidan, you do all this team building with us and we're having all this success. Look at the share price. And I said, yeah. And he said, what I want to do is I want you to take us up onto this track. It's somewhere in Papua New Guinea. And if I remember rightly, he called it the Coca-Cola track. And I couldn't believe it. In those days, we didn't have Google. So we didn't get online and look at this thing called the Coca-Cola track. And so what I actually meant was that I actually had to fly up there. I actually had to go and do the hard yards. I had to get into a little plane and then find my way into the hills of Papua New Guinea. And for an Irishman coming from Dublin, that was a major, major, major eye-opener in more ways than one. But it set me off on this fantastic journey. And it was totally out of the ordinary. But in that journey over the 24 years, I got to meet so many different people. And people have come from all walks of life. I've had Scott Morrison, for example. Some people would have said, leave him there. I've had lots and lots of different famous CEOs up there. I've had lots of football teams. I've had Hawthorn. And Hawthorn out of the AFL. We've had the Broncos. We've had so many. We're doing a lot of stuff with the Australian cricket team. We're trying to get them up there as well. So in that time frame, in that 24-year period, the people that have been up there, normal people as well. We've also had people with all sorts of different medical conditions. We've had people with no legs take it on. We've had people with one leg. We've had people with heart transplants. We've had people with all sorts of different issues. We have people with emotional suffering. We do a lot of stuff with PTSD with the soldiers who have come back from Afghanistan. And it goes on and on and on. We had everybody. We've had so much exposure to all these different people. And what it's taught us is that we see people in the most extreme environment up there in Papua New Guinea on the Kokoda track. And they're following in the footsteps of history. So with the history has created this legacy. You know, we all know that, well, something happened on the Kokoda track. And it was all about this battle that took place. And it was all about a bunch of young kids being sent up there with very little training. It's about 420 young kids, totally outnumbered at a place called Isarava. Now, if I say Isarava in here, most of you probably don't know Isarava, but if I say Gallipoli, everybody knows Gallipoli. But yeah, Isarava, August 1942, is probably the battle that saved Australia. And we're talking about a place that's only 3 hours from here. 420 young kids all dug in, and up on the ridges around the mountainside was over 12,000 Japanese. So they knew at any point in time, if the Japanese got past them on that track, well, then there was a good chance we were going to take Australia. And I was smart enough that when I did the track initially, when I came back, I searched all the diggers that had survived because I wanted to know their story from the horse's mouth. I didn't want to spend time rehashing the history. I wanted to hear from them. And the one question I asked them was, what was it that got you through this whole thing? And every single one of them turned around and said, Aidan, even though we were sitting there in the trenches and it was hammering rain, because 1942 was the highest rainfall ever recorded in Papua New Guinea, even though it was raining so heavy, we didn't have the equipment that we should have had, we hadn't had a decent feed for about 8 or 9 days, we were sitting there shoulder to shoulder, and the Japanese, totally outnumbered, they had better weapons than us, they had mountain guns, we still believed that we could do it. 420 young kids, average age 18 years of age. 18 years of age, think about that. They're sitting there shoulder to shoulder, and you know that if your mate falls asleep in that foxhole on that perimeter, well then the Japanese are going to come around and they're going to take you, your life. That's what's going to happen. But they believed in their heart and soul that if they got past that point, they'd go all the way to Australia. That's what they believed. The question I asked them was, what kept you going? And every single one of them turned around to me and said, Aidan, you know what kept us going? It was mateship. We always believed, no matter how hard it was, no matter how tough we were doing it, we always believed that our back was covered at all times. Mateship. It's the greatest Australian thing. We all know it as the Australian culture. And to see it in action, I've seen it in action many, many times in so many different extreme environments. Mateship. The Kokoda track has so many different faces. We've got some of the most beautiful terrain in the world, and we've got some of the most isolated areas as well. And when people go up there, the first thing that we find is that, well, they start to peel back all the layers of their conditioning. And then all of a sudden, these perceptions that they once had, they start to realize, well, that's all it is. It's just conditioning. It stops you, or it stops them, it stops us from becoming extraordinary. So when you give people the opportunity in these kind of environments, what I find with the right support, they step up to the plate. I've never had anybody not finish it. I've never had anybody not succeed. 100%, over 121 tracks, over 24 years. Nobody has not made it. And everyone asks me, what is it? What is it that keeps these people going? What is it that you keep instilling in these people to make them believe that they can do it? Guys up there with no legs. You know, they still do it. What it is the history, the legacy, those who've gone before. Because when you're up there, that's what you're doing. You're walking in the footsteps of those who've gone before. It's an isolated environment. 24 years ago, the CEO of Microsoft asked me to take his team up there. And when I flew up there, I'll never forget it because it was in a little plane. And the little plane, the door was opening as we were flying and it was raining. And it was hopping around the sky. And we came down and we landed in this little place. There it is there. It's a little village in the middle of nowhere. The plane landed. And I remember thinking, as I got out, now I realize what the Pope was doing every time he used to get down and kiss the ground. Because that's what I felt like doing. I survived it. So the plane, that's what it was. So we landed, I got out. And one of the most important things and one of the greatest learnings that I got from the whole Kokoda campaign was here. I watched other people get off that plane, and the first thing they did was they walked up to the elders. And the elders, this fella here, in those days it was scary. This is how they were. They were dressed like this. Not like you find back in Dublin in Ireland. You don't get that, even at the pubs. And this is what we used to see. So I remember watching other people go to him, and the first thing they did was they said, you need to have this, you need to have this, you need. And the biggest learning I ever got was I sat back and I observed. The most important thing is to observe, to sit back, smell the roses and see what's going on here. And that's what I did. So when it was my turn, I went up to him because he was the chief. I said to him, well, what do you need? And he turned around to me and he said, Aidan, we don't need anything. We have our systems in play. Just because you don't recognize them doesn't mean they're not successful. And he turned around and he said to me, Aidan, how our system works out here is that we plant a crop. We plant a crop. As long as it rains and as long as that crop grows, we're happy. That's what keeps us alive. Very, very simple. When we talk about team building, we're talking about tribalism. These are the most successful tribes. They've been around a long time. So hence the reason why We sit back and we watch, we observe. The other thing he turned around and told me, and most important thing here is, and you see this in organizations that are very, very smart, is legacy. How many organizations are here today where you don't celebrate your legacy? Where you don't turn around and say, we have a history. Let's celebrate it. Let's celebrate what we've done. Let's celebrate what Hands Across the Water has done. Peter Baines has done an amazing job. Let's celebrate it. Who does that? The legacy that was created all those years ago when he threw that initial stone. Let's celebrate it. These people here are brilliant at it. They turn around, they say, well, how it works, all those who are strong, they go out and they do the farming. The elderly people, the older people, they stay behind in the villages with the young kids and they pass their way down. They spend the time with the children, teaching them their way, teaching them their history, the history of an organization, the legacy of an organization, the CEO of an organization. What do they stand for? Who are these people? They teach it. They teach it. And we're sitting here and we're watching this and we're going, well, hang on a minute. This is what we're trying to do, developing culture within sporting teams, within organizations. And here it is, the simplest form. You pass it down. It's very, very simple. And I was blown away by this. And I said, wow. I said, that one question, what do you need? Later on, I'd learned that that became a needs analysis. And as you know, if you run an organization, if you pay a consultant for a needs analysis, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. What do you need? Very simple. His method was that he was teaching his young kids that what you put in the ground is what you reap. People are the same. And we see this all the time. We see it all the time. People come out with ideas. You can either knock them on the head and say, no, 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 or you can encourage them. You can water the seed and the seed grows. That's what he was brilliant at doing. He was absolutely brilliant at doing it. And he's the most important man up there in Kokoda, even today. There you go. Anyway, so that's where I came across him, and then we became really, really good friends. As I was exploring the Kokoda track, that's his wife, I came across the fact that, well, this was so far outside my comfort zone, because no matter how many beers you got in the Dublin pub back home, you never get to dress up like this. You never. And the thing is, like, you know, that's not river dance. That ain't river dance. So we can't compete with that as an Irishman, you know. So this is what we were faced with, all this stuff. So it became this massive learning thing, you know. You can hear the Irish accent in there. So when I came back off the first track, the first man I got in touch with was a fellow named Stan Bissett. Stan Bissett was one of the heroes of the Kokoda track. And he introduced me to Ralph Honor. And Ralph Honor was the hero of the Kokoda track, if you ask me. Then I spent a lot of time searching out all these mentors. So these mentors then became guides to me. They allowed me to become from an ordinary situation to an extraordinary situation, because they were there on the grounds. They were the people who fought the battles. They accessed all the history to me. They gave me their diaries. They made sure, I made a promise to that man that I would keep the history alive, that I wouldn't let it go, because it's so important. If you don't know where you came from, how do you know you're going? Same applies to an organization. And Stan's background was, well, he was a Wallaby. In 1939, he was sent overseas to play for Australia. And when he got to England to play against the English, unfortunately, World War II was declared and he couldn't play. So they were sent back home to Australia to go to war. Stan was a great man, very, very fit. He passed away when he was 98 years of age. Until the day he died, he still exercised. He was a staunch person. He was a great man with a sense of duty, and he wanted the story alive. I made a promise to that man. When I went back up to the track, I had done a lot of stuff where we'd built schools. We had built an orphanage as well. And then one day I was up there in the mountains, and I got a tap on the shoulder from another chief. And he said, Aidan, I want you to come down and talk to my people. I want you to come down, and we're on the river. So the river, the Camusi River. And the Camusi River is a massive river. It's huge. It flows with massive, massive, massive waves, rapids. And I said, no worries. So I walked down. It was about 10 k's from where I was. Now, the mountains up there, it's like something you see out of Colombia. That's what it's like. So I'm walking back to this village. And as I got near the village, this is what I was confronted with. Except there was about 500 of these people. And as I got closer, you could smell the smoke. They had the fires going, you know, and you could hear all the drums. You could hear all the noise. And I got closer to the village, and the chief turned around and he said, Aidan, there's a lectern. Go and have a chat, talk to the people. And so I went, okay. So I stood up at the lectern in the middle of this village, totally outside my comfort zone, totally outside the square. And so I stood there and I talked about, it doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter what colour your skin is, doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter what religion you have, we're all equal. Out here we're equal. It's all about survival. And I had seen that. I had seen that on the Dakota track, dealing with it. Doesn't matter, people are all the same. And so I was on a roll, and when I was finished, the place went absolutely berserk. And they're all playing the drums and they're, banging the spears on the ground as well. It was quite confronting in more ways than one. Anyway, the chief turned around and he escorted me down to this river, because there were river people. They lived on the river. And so I'll never forget it, because there on the edge of the river was this raft, and it was made out of banana trees. So I don't know the last time you've been on a raft. You know the way you get these feelings sometimes, and I'm walking down here and all these people are around me like this, and they're making all this noise, so they're escorting me down to this thing, And on the raft had this plastic chair. And you know what, you get this feeling that goes, this is not going to be good. So it was tethered, so the raft was tethered to the bank. Anyway, so the chief turned around to me and says, Aidan, you go and sit on that chair, go and sit in it. I'm going, right. So I went down, I sat in the chair. The chair, you can feel the raft sink a little bit, and you can see the water coming over your boots, sitting there, And I'm thinking, this is not going to be pretty. Anyway, all of a sudden there was this huge noise. They started hitting the drums and they started shouting and screaming. And I said, so what are they doing? And he says, well, Aidan, they really like what you're doing. They really believe in what you're saying. But more importantly, they believe that the journey that you're on, you're going to need protection. So they're calling up all the river gods to protect you. I'm going, right, oh yeah, no problem. I can wear that. So I'm sitting there on my Sweeney, and next minute, the crescendo gets bigger, and the chief comes down with his machete and chops the rope. And so I'm on this raft, and I'm bopping along on these rapids, and I can see it's going to go into really heavy-duty stuff. But the one thing about Papua New Guinea culture that I'd learned was you cannot show fear. Even though you're scared shitless, you can't show fear. So I had to hold eye contact. So I'm going, oh yeah, we do this in Ireland. This is how we go to school in Ireland. And so we're bopping up and down. Here we are, and everybody's standing along the bank, and they're all looking at me going, ha, 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 ha. And they're making all this noise, So here I am, up and down, and I'm thinking, holy shit, I gotta get off this thing. And I know that 5 kilometers down the river, there's a massive rapid, and if you don't get off that, you're dead. It's that simple. Anyway, so as I get out of sight of them, thinking, right out, and then I had to kick in. I had to get a plan, had to sort it. How do I get off this thing, And I knew there was rocks coming up. So I got to the rocks, and I managed to get from one rock to another rock, back onto the land. And when I got on the land, I breathed. I thought, wow, how cool is that? Anyway, so what I did then was, I had to make my way back to the village. So I could smell the smoke still, and I walked back to the village. When I came back to the village, the chief, he came up to me, and he ran up to me, put his arms around me, and he's as happy as, And they're small people, so they're only about that height, So he's grabbing me, and he's doing all this sort of stuff. And all the people are going mad again. They're going bang, 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 bang on the drums again, And I'm thinking, righto. And I said to him, so why are they making all this noise? And he turned around and he said, well, they didn't expect to see you. They thought, it was a test for the river gods. So now that you're back, it means that the gods listened and they protected you. So here you are. Well done. How good is that? Welcome from Ireland. And then he turned around to me and he handed me this necklace made out of pig's teeth. And he placed it on me and he called me, from now on, you're called Uda Broma. And Uda Broma means wild pig. I'm the wild pig. So it's a term of endearment apparently. So from there on in, for the next 20 odd years, I'm still to this day called Uda Broma, which means wild pig. So I have to explain that all the time, So that's how it all started. So the most important thing here was that because I was able to embrace that change, I was able to take on the challenge, remove that big word that we all know, it's called fear. When you remove the fear, when you go from ordinary to extraordinary, that word fear stops. It tends to stop everybody. I see it no matter what you do. I see it with the SAS. I see it with all the soldiers that we deal with. I see it with the police. I see it with CEOs. I see it with normal people. I see it with every situation. Get rid of the word fear and you can do anything, absolutely anything. And it's been proven time and time again in these environments. After this, I took on a challenge. And one of the challenges was I had access to so many different leaders. And somebody talked about leaders earlier. And we've spoken about, Nelson Mandela, Bill Gates, blah, 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 blah. And they're all classified as leaders. What is leadership? Where in the sand do we draw a line that says ordinary to extraordinary? Where is that point? And most people don't know because they never get themselves into these situations. They never challenge themselves. That's what you got to do. You got to put yourself out there. You absolutely have to get rid of that word fear and put yourself out there and have a go. Because you know what? You're not going to fail. You just set new standards all the time. That's what happens. Nobody fails. It's all learning. It's a journey. We're all on a journey. There you go. We're on a journey. How cool is that? Bottom line is, I got a phone call, and it was from the police, and he said, Aidan, you've got to take this kid on the track. He's 16 years of age, doesn't speak, he's a pain in the backside, he's going to end up in jail for the rest of his life if you don't do something about it. And I said, right, thanks. I'll take him with me. And I'd done a lot of stuff with delinquent kids that were in the judiciary, and I still do that today. And so I rang him, and I said, listen, mate, you need to come for a walk with me. And say, I went for a walk with him. And he wasn't talking. And the organizer that was looking after me, he said, look, he's not going to go up on the track because if he does, none of us are going to go. Because this fella causes problems. He never talks. He's just out there. And I said, but that's what the track's about. The track was about everybody pulling together to create this defensive position so that he could overcome the Japanese. There's the learning. I'm taking him. Oh, they went mad. Anyway, so I persevered, and we took him up into Kokoda. All the kids that he was walking with, they didn't want anything to do with him. They didn't want anything to do with him because he was different. He was different. He wasn't a cool kid. He never talked. He never spoke. He's different. We don't want to talk to him. How many times do you see this in organizations? He's different or she's different. Bottom line is, he was walking the track, wasn't saying anything until the second day he turned around to me and he said, Aidan, he said, do you mind if I sleep around the fire with the guides? And I said, well, as long as you're not causing any problems, I don't see there's a drama in that. I'd already briefed the boys and I let them know. So he turned around and he started sleeping around the fire with them. So finally, he started to find a tribe that welcomed him. In search of a tribe. He found a tribe. And so the first thing they did was, well, if you want to sit around the fire with us, there's a cost on that. We're going to give you a role. Your role is to go down every day and get the water. And when you get the water, you bring it back up here, make sure you don't spill any, and then we'll cook our food. Without food, we're dead. Without water, we're dead. So what effectively they were doing was they were giving them a role, they were recognizing it, but more importantly, you had a responsibility. Responsibility. Then they were able to validate. How many times do you do a great job at work and somebody never turns around and you say, great job, mate, or they steal it? You've been in that situation. And that happens. This was a fantastic thing for this kid because all of a sudden he found a tribe that didn't push him away, that actually made him feel welcome. Because out there in the jungle, it's about love, it's about warmth, it's about shelter, it's about food and water. It's very, very simple. All the layers of society are peeled back and you get people that are the most honest, the most innocent, the most pure. And here it was. And so I watched that kid develop over the next few days. There's a rock on the track where the guy that I introduced you to a minute ago, the old soldier, Stan Bissett, he lost his brother. His brother was killed there. And so Stan sat with his brother and he sang Danny Boy as his brother passed away. Now to this day, I always sing Danny Boy there. Now a lot of people cry. It could be my voice. Never thought that. But anyway, when I'm standing there, we're singing Danny Boy. It's quite an emotional time. On this particular time, I stood there at the rock, and I'm singing, Danny Boy, da-da-da-da-da-da. And when I was finished, I turned around to all the kids, and I said, look, is there anybody here who wants to say anything? It doesn't matter what it is. Anybody got anything to make a difference? Doesn't matter. Everybody's got something. And you know what kids are like? They drop their heads. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to know anything. And out of nowhere, I kid you not, this kid who'd never spoken, he stepped up on the rock. And then, out of nowhere, he starts singing, ain't no mountain high enough. And I'm looking at them, and they're looking at me, and I'm going, what the hell going on here? And he's letting it rip. This is his moment. This is a moment where he goes from ordinary to extraordinary. That was a moment. And he's there, and he's letting it rip, and he's got all the moves, And then he was finished. And everybody looked at me. I said, well, don't look at me. And then he was gone. And then over the next 2 or 3 days, you know the coolest thing? All the other group tried to bring him in to their tribe. And guess what? I'm not going to use those Irish words, I promise. He turned around and said, now get stuffed, because I now have a value. I've got a value. You can't just come to me now and bring me back into that tribe because I've got a value. How often do you see that in an industry? You cannot do that. And so that kid then became a fantastic leader, a natural leader. And he would walk the track, put his bag up the top of the hill, come back down and help all his mates. And every single one of them were in awe of this kid. And they just wanted him back, and he didn't. No way. When we got into Brisbane, I left him. His mother was waiting there. And she rang me on the way home. She said, Aidan, don't know what you've done to my kid, but when he came through customs, he came running up to me, 16-year-old, put his arms around me, said, I love you, Mum. And she said, I've never heard that. I've never heard that. He said, I love you, Mum. And I said, well, it's about to get better. Stay tuned. A week later, she rings me and says, oh my God, you're not going to believe what he's done. And I said, I will. What's he done? And she said, well, he's drawn up a list of his mates, his loser mates, and he's ranked them one after the other and said, don't want to do anything, don't want anything to do with you anymore, you can't be in my life anymore, blah, 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 you're a loser, you're a little, and he's gone through about 15 of them. And I said, well, let me explain something. The kid's autistic. And the reason why he's been in trouble with the law, and the reason why he's been treated so differently, is because nobody diagnosed, nobody took the time out to observe, nobody took the time out to watch. Like when I went up in the Kokoda track initially, when I took the time out to see what was going on, nobody had done that. And here was this kid, he's got a job, and now he's a fantastic success story. So when people ask me, who is a great leader? He was a great leader. In more ways than one. So my journey continued. So I continued to walk the Kokoda track, and I continued to play. Stan became a major part of who I am, and as I say, I made that promise to him. My story continues, and we continue to walk the track. I'm going to leave you with this video because I think it's important. Ladies and gentlemen, it's their story. Not my story, their story. And this beautiful country that you live in, there was a price that was paid. Be the best that you can be. Thank you.